You know, as we were trying to figure out what to cover this week on the Means Report, there were two topics. Of course, the tragedy on our roads that Kyle was kind enough to tackle in our first segment. And the other big story of this week had to be the weather and the ever-changing temperatures, weather patterns, you name it, that we've been witnessing of late. And so usually after a weird weather event, we have our chief meteorologist, George Myers, on the set to explain it, and today's no different. And George, I appreciate you being here because it's been confusing for a lot of us. And
it's been a strange winter, hasn't it?
It has been strange. Was there a winter? Am I just forgetting some cold days we had maybe in December? Did we really have it temperature-wise?
Very early in the winter, we had some cold temps. Late December, we had a few days in the 20s. Early January, we had a few mornings in the middle 20s. And after that, it just went to historic record-breaking levels for late January, February, and early March.
Well, does this add any fuel to the fire for the global warming theorists out there? Do you think it was just something that happened?
I think it's just something that happened. We've had some very cold winters and some very low temperatures occur here in Georgia, Carolina during January and February. And this time the weather pattern just changed on us. We've all heard of La Nina and El Nino, the cycle of sea surface temperature changes in the Pacific.
Right.
And that can change the entire weather pattern for North America. And that's what happened this time. All that cold Arctic air pretty much slid west to east across Canada and out to sea. We weren't influenced by that polar jet stream, which plunged all that cold, which will usually plunge cold air into the southeast.
Right.
We were more dominated by the subtropical jet, which brings us mild Pacific air. So all the cold stuff stayed north, in other words.
Well, a lot of times when we have you on at the end of a typical winter where we've had plenty of cold weather, you always say that we're in store for at least one more blast of cold before Masters. Did we get that out of the way this past week, or is it still possible for us to have a return of the cold?
Our average last freeze is late March. So by March 30th, that's usually when we're done with the freezing temperatures. However, we have seen freezes as late as April 24th. That occurred back in 1986. So average late March, but on occasion you have a very late April freeze. But for all intents and purposes, once we get to April 1st, we're pretty much done with the cold weather. But it looks like it may be too late anyway, because we had all the record-breaking heat in February, and everything was blooming. The azaleas, the dogwoods, the Bradfords, and the not the pears, but the peach crop.
Yep.
And now those peach farmers are trying to salvage maybe a little bit of that crop after that devastating cold.
Another thing we talk about with the onset of Masters is the onset of severe weather season. Any thoughts on that, and what advice can you give us as far as keeping track of the weather and staying safe?
Sure. It's usually impossible to predict how many tornadoes we're going to have. Now, last year was relatively quiet. Excuse me, we had 880 tornadoes in the U.S., which is below the average of 1,000 to 1,200. The fatality rate was down. About 16 people lost their lives. As tragic as that was, that's still very low. Because remember, back in 2011, nearly 560 some Americans lost their lives in tornadoes. But severe weather season is arriving, so late March through mid-May is when we have our best opportunity to see tornadoes here in Georgia and South Carolina.
The weather radios seem like they were a big hit this year. Can you talk about those, and are there any left?
Yeah, every February during the Wednesday afternoons and evenings, our weather team will go to a local Kroger and have these weather radios available for people to purchase, and then we will program them for them. And this is just one of the models we have. It's the mobile model. You take it home and plug it in for 5 hours, the battery's charged, and the solar panel will take over. And the main deal about this is if the power goes out, you have AM/FM radio, you have the National Weather Service, you have a flashlight, you can charge your phone, and you can take it with you wherever you want to go. Now, during the ice storm a few years ago, a lot of folks lost electricity for many days, had to go into the garage, plug their phone into the car, and start the car in the garage, which isn't a safe practice, but it was the only way to get the phone charged. If you have this, you don't have to worry about it. Plus, if there's a warning for your county, an alarm goes off, which will wake the dead, Brad, and let you know. It's like your smoke detector, and it'll let you know a severe weather event is near your neighborhood.
What about any concerns that you've gotten from viewers? I hate to have you on without giving you a chance to address those who get annoyed when you do the cut-ins.
Yes.
Because the storm isn't over them, and we have about 30 seconds left, but you have to protect everybody.
We have to protect everybody, and we hate to interrupt programming. We know we're messing up somebody's evening, but somebody else is being threatened by a life-threatening tornado. We only go on when there's a possible tornado on the ground. That's the only time.
So that's the threshold. If there's a tornado on the ground, we're going to cut into programming.
That's right.
Well, George, I hope people take advantage of the weather radios, and I wish you could play the alarm. I was trying to see if there was enough time for you to play the alarm, but it probably would hurt our ears.
Yes, yeah. It would make that meter spike in the control room.
All right, thank you. Chief Meteorologist George Myers updating us on our weather situation.